Hello, my lovelies. This is going to be all about dispelling myths about energy vampires, going into different types of energy vampires, different ways that energy vampires feed, and also ways you can protect yourself from energy vampires, or if you are an energy vampire, protecting yourself from other energy vampires. So I will briefly address positive and negative polarity protections. So that's what I'm going to be going into. Also on Patreon, that I will be following up with in the very near future, is actually teaching you how to alter your energy bodies in order to become a vampire if you were not one already. A lot of people are unconscious vampires and don't even realize it. Also, everybody does it a little bit when they're feeling a little out of whack, but this will be a way that you can basically alter your energy system in order to do that. If that is something that you want to do, I am going to be teaching that. I'm also going to be teaching advanced vampire and succubus techniques of going more in depth with using tantric vampiric techniques, also vampiric techniques on how to feed off of egregores, tulpas, servitors, astral parasites, thought forms, things of that nature, and also how to astral project for vampirism as well. So all of that will be on Patreon if you're interested. The reason I decided to do this is I've been getting requests from people on YouTube and on Patreon about going more into vampirism. I already have talked about vampirism a decent amount on Patreon, but I want to revisit and circle back around because there is a lot more I could talk about, and there is a growing interest in this, and so I wanted to go ahead and give the people what they want, so to speak. So let's get into it. Dispelling myths about energy vampires. Let's tackle that one first. So there's a lot of myths in the lightworker community that all energy vampires are quote unquote negative. One of the ones that I used to believe, actually, even though I found out I was an unconscious vampire like for a long time, one that I used to believe is that vampirism, if you had to vampire, it meant you were weak. That's another myth I'm going to dispel, and I'll explain why in a minute. And the third myth is that all energy vampires are, having like a baneful or harmful effect on people. And that's also not true. I'm going to get into all three of these. So with the first myth about all energy vampires being like, for example, all like evil or negative or however you want to say it. First of all, negative and positive polarities or energetic polarities primarily associated with feminine and masculine, receptive versus projective, lunar versus solar, order versus chaos. These are simply energetic polarities. There is no good or evil. And you can believe there is, and that's fine if you are stuck in that duality paradigm, and that's basically how I'm going to say it. And so if that offends some people, I apologize. I mean, you are, as a sovereign being, free to believe in whatever you want. But I feel that when we propagate these ideas of good and evil, dark and light, these things of everything being at war with itself, it's separate, and all this other shit, is really actually us propagating the duality of that lowest sphere of the Qliphoth. So technically, if you want to get technical, you are part of that anyway. But I'm not going to go into that. So I digress. Energy vampires are not all out to get you. They're not evil. A lot of them were born that way. So there are some that actually do have a lot of soul fragmentation from trauma that they've never healed. And so it actually created these reverse vortex black holes in their aura, which are not conscious. They're not like consciously created in order to transmute energy, like how a black magician vampire who's like a initiated created vampire might do. This is more unconscious, and it's usually because of trauma. So there was some sort of soul fragmentation that took place. There was some sort of, fucked up shit that basically happened. And as a result, their energy system is weakened. Some people are born already vampires because they were practicing vampires in other lifetimes. Sometimes they were astral vampires that decided to incarnate back into a human body. Extra dimensional, like vampiric race collectives that are soul groups of vampiric races. And there's different kinds. Most common are like the pale-skinned Uranus or Palladian vampire races, or the vampire races of the reptilian races. Again, not all Uranians or Palladians or reptilians are vampiric. Many of them are. So it could be that as well. But either way, some are born, some are made through environments unconsciously, and it becomes an unconscious thing that they do. And then others do it consciously. And honestly, the ones that are the most dangerous are the ones that are unconscious through trauma, because it's really a result of them not healing that shit. And so they're the ones that will tend to, and I'm going to go into different types of energy vampires, but they tend to be the ones that are the most harmful to themselves or others. And we'll go into the different types of energy vampires in a moment, because I want to finish dispelling these myths. The other myth is that if you're a vampire, you're weak. Like, if you have to feed off of another being, you're weak. Well, that's kind of silly. Raise your hand if you eat meat. Because if you eat meat, or you have ever eaten meat, that is an example of you feeding off of, the energy of death, basically, and off of another being. And even if you're vegetarian or vegan, you're still having to eat or feed off of another being to sustain yourself. We're not living in the golden age where we're all just existing off of the pranic life force within our own bodies. It's not like that. Just like the old Tool song, goes, life feeds on life, feeds on life, feeds on life. So everything is essentially feeding on something else. It's just, what part of the chain are you on? Are you a fucking apex predator? Are you a fucking dragon or a fucking lion? Or a fucking tiger? Or are you a fucking, mouse? Or fucking bunny? Or a fucking deer? You know what I'm saying? So everybody's feeding or eating on something. The difference is that vampiric people are predatorial. Everyone feeds on something, right? But a more predatorial energy is going to feed on an intelligent force, or feed on the emotions or their energy of an intelligent force in order to sustain themselves. It doesn't make them weak. It doesn't make them bad. It's just part of that cycle or circle of life, right? So you wouldn't say a lion is bad for eating a deer. Everybody, is who they are. So moving on to the part about them all being negative and harmful, that's actually another misnomer. There are many harmful vampiric beings, there are many harmful energy vampires, whether it's unconscious or conscious. But there are also many energy vampires that are selective in how they feed and can actually help people by feeding on their shadows, feeding on their sickness, feeding on their soul shells, or their ego shells. In other words, feeding on the false masks and versions of themselves that they have put up, as a result to get through the world, that prevents them from accessing their authentic self or being able to complete whatever mission they might have given themselves before they came here, right? Or, the vampire may feed off of certain negative emotions or negative thought forms, things of that nature. So, or they may even feed off of astral parasites in some cases, or maybe somebody's servitor was sent out by a magician to attack you. That vampire could eat the servitor, right? Or maybe they could feed off of an egregoric, being. What's egregoric is an energy being, an intelligent energy being created by a collective of people that they worship, that it stores knowledge, they worship it and empowers them. An example of an egregore would be like Jesus Christ, for example, okay? So, and that is like one of the oldest egregores, because it is essentially like a copy of other egregores that are really like solar savior egregores, but I digress. So what I'm getting at here is that a vampire can feed off of things that would actually get in your way of growth, of soul evolution, and in alignment with your soul and with, the universe, the collective consciousness, source, the void, whatever you want to call it, however you feel aligned, the great spirit or whatnot. Okay. So now that I've dispelled those myths, I want to now talk about the different kinds of vampires. So the most common kind, I'm just going to call this the main category, is an unconscious vampire. These are the types, as I mentioned earlier, that are definitely the most dangerous because they unconsciously will create dramatic environments or toxic environments or drain the energy of a room or constantly need help or assistance or emotional support because of that black hole or tear that they have in their energy field from trauma that never got healed. So it just kind of just became part of their energetic mechanisms. So these can be emotional vampires that feed off of emotions. They can be sexual, or succubus or incubus vampires that feed off of sexual energy. They can be, psychic vampires that feed more off of psychic energy or like life force or chi. There's different types that are unconscious vampires. So basically any kind of vampire can be conscious or unconscious. So for example, an unconscious energy vampire may be the kind of person where they go to a party and everyone's having fun and they start feeling all charged up and everyone around them just starts feeling depleted and tired, and it's almost like the party crashes, but that person feels great, as they're on their way out. That's an example of an unconscious energy vampire. A conscious energy vampire would probably go in there and be like, oh, the energy feels nice in here. I'll sample a little of this, I'll sample a little of that. Kind of like the difference between somebody that, goes to a party and has a couple drinks versus somebody that just gets fucking annihilated, and they're just, they're on the floor passed out. So because of that, unconscious vampires can just keep vampiring off of the people usually that they're the closest to, because those are the people that they feel that source of strength from, or that fill that void that they literally feel inside of themselves. So an emotional vampire would be somebody, that feeds off of the emotions. So positive emotions, negative emotions. These are the ones that typically can be narcissistic, or they might even be like victims, like perpetual victims. They're the ones that constantly want emotional support and advice all the time. And whenever you're done talking to them or being around them or helping them, you just always kind of feel like you're losing out in some kind of way. You feel drained, or maybe your finances start getting affected negatively, things of that nature. They can also create drama. They could be narcissistic and gaslight. There's a lot of different ways this can manifest. When you're dealing with more of the psychic or the more life force vampires, these vampires are dealing more with like mental energy, thoughts, and also like life force. So you don't see too many unconscious vampires at this level unless they were vampires in other lifetimes, because it takes a certain amount of skill to be this type of vampire. But this type of vampire can still exist unconsciously. This would be the kind of person that steals ideas, that steals, and I don't mean stealing ideas like they know an idea you had, and that is another form, by the way. So people that seem to absorb your money, your luck, your finances, your ideas, those are also types of vampires as well, okay? But when I mean ideas, I mean it seems like they almost take your ideas right out of your skull before you've even had a chance to speak them when they're around. High level, but it can happen, right? Or if they tap into your life force, You might actually feel depleted to the point of becoming sick after you're around them. You might literally display feelings of feeling sick, like maybe you're sick to your stomach, maybe you're starting to hang your head, maybe your, eyelids are getting droopy. That's a sign you're dealing with somebody that's a life force vampire. Or it could be any kind of vampire that they're just feeding off of you consistently. And it's sad, but the unconscious vampires will tend to be the people that are closest to us. Family members, friends, lovers, colleagues, bosses, things of that nature. So then we have the succubus or incubus. So an unconscious succubus or incubus is somebody, every time they have sex, they're going to drain you of that energy. So if they like to bring you to orgasm so they can drain your energy. Again, it's not conscious. They just feel nurtured and they feel energized from that sexual energy. They may tend to be what modern society would deem promiscuous, where they have a lot of partners. They probably have difficulty sustaining like any kind of long-term relationships because of the severe depletion that goes on. So they more so will choose different partners and kind of hop around, or they get in like very short-term cyclical relationships. Now, once they become, if they're conscious, then they can consciously do tantric work with that energy and use it either to help the other person or to help themselves, and just not do it as aggressively and as, unconsciously. And usually the conscious succubus or incubus can have, sustainable relationships with others that they're intimate with, but there would have to be a practice of mindfulness, and there would have to be a consent that was going on between both people, and they would have to be using those skills, to advance themselves and the other person. So that's kind of the different types. Again, as I already mentioned, there's also extra dimensional types that would be like different races, and there's also astral vampires as well. So I want to include those too. Astral vampires could have had a physical human body or some other body from another dimension, and after they died, instead of reincarnating, they decided to become permanently in the astral as a vampire, and in order to sustain themselves, they feed off of people in the astral. Another type of vampire is the black magician vampire, which all black magicians are vampires, but not all vampires are black magicians. Okay, what I mean by black magician, someone's on the left-hand path. You cannot go through the entire clip-off without being a vampire. It's impossible. You have to. That's part of like the lessons that you learn as you're going through there. So when you're going through there, you're essentially negatively polarizing yourself. Every human contains positive and negative energy and polarity. So I don't mean in a literal sense of you only exist in negative energy. What I mean is the way you process your energy is going to be more drawing into yourself, like through that recessive, like dark feminine energy, instead of the more projective light masculine energy. Okay. Oh, and I also want to mention that a lot of times people that come from soul groups, or within their DNA and their other lifetimes have incarnated within vampiric soul groups, will tend to incarnate as humans that have vampiric tendencies, because there are overlays there within the energetic DNA, and because as above, so below, as within, so without, right? So that's another thing. So I now want to talk about the different ways that different types of energy vampires feed. So you can feed through visualization. So for example, I'm going to say pretty much all vampires, whether they are aware of it or not, have created like programmed thought forms within their astral bodies that can take on the characteristics of things that are predatorial or vampire. For example, they may have astral bodies that look like Venus flytraps, or astral bodies that look like they have this monstrous mouth or vortex with all these tentacles coming out, or astral bodies that literally have teeth in the chakras, or teeth like vampire succubus teeth overlaid over their mouth, right? They may have like demon wings or horns. If they're succubus especially, they may have like, bird feet. They may look bat-like or bird-like or dragon-like. They may have reverse vortexes or mouths with teeth in the palms of their hands or the bottom of their feet. So these are just different ways that you can spot an energy vampire if you're looking at their aura. A big one is they'll just have a big black fucking void in the middle of their energy body, or located in some or all of their chakras. Now, I did talk about it in another post on Patreon. For those of you that are on Patreon, I do talk about the difference between empaths, sin eaters, and vampires and how it all kind of overlaps. And I'm obviously, throwing succubus and incubus in with the vampire mix because they are a type. And I want to just clear something up real quick. If we're going off of mythology alone, okay, succubus and vampires are not identical, but they are related because they come from Lilith, okay? The difference between vampires and succubus or incubus is that succubus and incubus feed almost exclusively on sexual energy, whereas a vampire, and I'm talking energy vampires, not sanguine, which is a different kind of vampire. That's blood drinking, and I didn't bring that up because that's not really what we're talking about here. But that is a different type also. But anyway, I digress. Whereas an energy vampire will feed on other types of energies. You can be both. And really, they both feed on energy. So, and they're both connected to Lilith. So I'm just putting that out there. So I digress. So these are the different ways that, vampires and succubus would feed. They some of them feed through direct touch. Some of them may feed by gazing at the person or in their eyes. They may breathe in the energy when the person exhales. Others might project out tentacles, project out the astral bodies, and do it that way. Other people, maybe when they're kissing somebody or they're, shaking their hand or hugging them, or again, during sex or oral sex, or near them but not close enough. Like they could be near them where their, auras are brushing but not completely across the room. So there's a lot of different ways that this can take place. Some vampires, and this is more the case when you're dealing with magicians, they may send out like a type of poisonous gas or a certain type of, psionic or psychic attack. They may put hooks in your aura. They may attach a cord to you or something, to kind of poke holes to get energy. So that's more so when they're treating someone like a target, because as I mentioned before, when you're an energy vampire and you're doing energy vampirism, you're not always trying to harm somebody. Sometimes you're just taking a little off the top, maybe like a little bit of whipped cream, as I said in one of my other posts on this topic. Other times you're taking stuff that actually helps the person in their evolution. So, it's not always you're trying to like damage somebody, but you can absolutely do that as well. So these are just some of the things that, energy vampires can use to feed. So they can also, if they know how to astral project, they can also project in the astral and attack you while you're off journeying in the astral. They can attack your body. So these are the reasons why I tend to tell people who are especially of positive polarity, because positive polarity people do not have the same type of energetic system to take in energy and transmute it. So these are the kind of people that benefit most from energetic shields and different types of, wards, cloaks, things of that nature, because their energetic system doesn't process energetic attacks or psychic attacks the way vampires or other more so negatively charged energy bodies would do, unless the person is an unconscious vampire and they don't realize it. But even then, if they're unconscious and it's due to any kind of trauma or damage, then it's still no bueno in that regard anyway. So this is why I always tell people, if you want to protect from it doesn't to be energy vampire, but any kind of psychic attack, if you're somebody that's in a positive polarity, you're a light worker, You're a practitioner, you do a lot of like representational magic. You're somebody that is like a reader or healer. I would say unless you are, you have a negative polarity energetic system, again, going back to what I was saying, it doesn't mean like all people who are more positively aligned still have negative energy, and all people who are more negatively aligned still have positive energy, and everything is contained within source. Duality is an illusion. So I'm saying for the sake of as far as how they process the energy, I'm not trying to imply that there's this like gulf or this chasm here or separation between the two in that regard. I'm just saying how each person processes the energy is what I mean. So for somebody that is, that processes energy on a positive charge, then they would benefit more from different types of amulets, for protection, more geometric, energetic wards, and things of that nature. And, another thing that can help with energy vampires is programming your, energy to actually have like a mirror on the outside, to do it that way, and to cloak, because then you're not found. And I would say, especially if you're sleeping at night, but I always tell clients to do like energetic shields twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. Most of my clients are positively charged energetic beings, and so I make these types of these types of protections, these types of protections to be more. I push these more than I do the other kinds, but I do talk about what I would say, quote unquote, are baneful protections that are more so aligned to the negative polarity, in the sense where it's not really baneful. It's not baneful like evil or bad. When I mean baneful, I mean they clap back. So for people that are on like the negative polarity, they may benefit more from having, like black flame shields that transmute energy, that like devour and transmute energy and feed it to the vampire or the negative polarity person. Or they might benefit from having wards up that actually harm and then, destroy, like trap and destroy certain types of beings, and then transmute that energy to, the vampire or the practitioner. Okay. Things of that nature. So you're still using protections, but instead of it being like, stay away, keep out, like you're having to constantly project out this energy to create a barrier between you and something else, it's more so like a filter that things can go through, and anything that has the intent to cause harm is going to get stuck in the filter and get destroyed and transmuted. So that's basically the difference. And so you're allowing that energy come in and to feed off of it and add to your own energy, but you're transmuting it in the process. So a positively charged person might have like an amulet that, protects them from psychic attacks by projecting out this energetic field, whereas a negative polarity person may have an amulet that actually draws in energy from energetic attacks or the evil eye, stores it in the amulet until the vampire can, and transmutes it while it's in there until the vampire can feed off of it. Or the vampire just feeds off of it after it gets transmuted automatically. So you can be charged for that as well. So that's basically in a nutshell what I wanted to talk about today. So I hope that answers a lot of questions you guys might have been having about vampires, myths about vampires. Also, and I'm talking about myths about energy vampires. I'm not talking about like sanguine vampires or anything like that, like, the blood-sucking kind, which is cool too. I mean, I could definitely do that, to talk about that another time if you guys want. We went into the different ways that vampires can feed and succubus and incubus can feed, and we went into ways that you can protect yourself from these beings, whether you're a vampire or not, whether you're positive polarity or negative polarity, okay? So, yeah, definitely give me a heart if you're on Patreon. Let me know that you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the comment section below or message me directly. If you're on YouTube, after I add this to the video on either Friday or Saturday, definitely give this video a like and hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. Also consider joining Patreon because I will be teaching people how to actually do the shit themselves. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Take care. Until next time. Check out my website, thetantricdr.com, to book a private Akashic reading or any other reading. Also, Akashic portraits, consultations, shamanic journeys, starseed charts, primordial dragon fire healing, and much more. You can also subscribe to Patreon to learn how to do a lot of this yourself through various templates I've designed. Activate Diamond Consciousness, Activate the Black Flame, Journey the Underworld, Tantric Healing and BDSM, Astral Projection and Power, Shields, Cloaks, Wards, Learning Light Language, Exclusive and Premier Readings, Soul Fragment Retrieval, Advanced Ancestral Work, Creating Your Own Shamanic Sanctuary, and much more. Thanks for your support and stay tuned for future videos.